secondary, it means for an hour that you grind your teeth. I mean, just kind of tough it out. But for the most part, when we finish with lesson planning, we think that 90% of your problems will be solved if you implement what we're giving you. So let's review. We talked about classroom design, and what were we looking for with classroom design?
Easy access
to all students.
So we wanted to make sure that we had a way to walk the room or work the room, kind of like a comedian would, and using proximity. But we also talked about some other things with design. What else?
like the red light, green light.
We talked about the zones and getting close and exploiting proximity. Go ahead and sit in that too, because you're going to want to visit. But we also talked about things that could distract you. What did we talk about there? Jenny said she did something with her tiles. Do you remember what she told you?
Yeah, not too many things on the walls, maybe. Just
Right.
eliminating a lot of.
So if you're a child with high-functioning autism or you're ADHD and you walk into a room that is just jam full of light and color and signs and posters, what do you think that child is going through?
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Did you know, fascinating fact, how many of you are SPED teachers? I know I have one or two. All right, check this out. For an autistic person, well, for you and I, we have about, I think, 250 brain cycles per second. For an autistic child, they have 250,000
Oh my God.
per second.
Really?
Have you ever been like reading a book and everything else is blocked out and somebody's talking to you and like you're totally oblivious? Or, right? You put something on the television as background noise, but you really don't have any clue what's on, and your wife walks in, what are you watching? Oh, I don't know. I was reading a book. Whatever, right? Autistic child or even ADHD child don't have the ability to filter. They don't know what to pay attention to and what not to, so they pay attention to everything. When we say hyper attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it doesn't mean the child can't pay attention. It means the child is paying attention to everything. So Sally's talking over there, Brian walked in the room, Billy got up to sharpen a pencil, the phone's ringing, the computer's not working right, the computer screen is crooked, there's a fan noise, all of it. And it's equally important. They don't know how to discern or filter what's important and what isn't. For an autistic child that's doing 250,000 brain cycles a second, what do you think they're physically feeling about 1 or 2 in the afternoon?
Exhausted.
Overwhelmed and exhausted. Overwhelmed and exhausted. Irritable. On edge. And so, among other things, the classroom design is critical. Here's something else. If you didn't know, they're integrated in your classroom. They're mainstreamed in. But did you know that all of this stimulus can cause, if you surprise them with something, you get out of your routine. Today's the day we're doing a rally and you didn't tell the student. And you surprise them with that. They can go off and lose it. They need structure like crazy, and it needs to be predictable. Even if the content changes, your routine needs to stay predictable. We found, though, that actually helps your gen ed students. They know what to expect. At 5 minutes to the bell, we stack our chairs. At 3 minutes to the bell, we line up. At 1 minute to the bell, we pick up our trash, whatever. And there's a predictability to it. Okay, we talk about staying calm. Why is that so important? Not revealing our emotions.
Because it's getting into the kids when we don't.
All right, so if we're getting into the kids, if we're getting angry, I told you that a certain Neanderthal reaction occurs. Starts with F. Remember what those were? Fight or flight. And our brain literally downshifts. We got a chair for you right here because we want you to be in a group for discussion, but don't forget to sign in and get the papers. Your brain really shifts down from its neocortex down into what we call that reptilian brain, that brain stem, and you're reacting instead of thinking logically. Good. What else? I told you that kids were the best at this, and somehow as adults we started losing this ability. What can they do better that we can't? Because we're older and wiser.
Read our reactions.
Read body language. kids are the best at reading body language, and somehow we kind of lose that over time. Not totally, but, or at least we're mature enough not to take on somebody else's emotions, right? If they're upset, everything's okay. Let me ask you this question. Let's imagine that I was a multi-billionaire, or I won the lottery, that $1 billion lottery. I got all the money in the world. I said, let's go on a cruise. And I say, Alaska's a wonderful cruise, let's go to Alaska. We get on this boat, and we head out under the Golden Gate Bridge, and we pass out into the open sea, and all of a sudden this Pacific storm comes up, and the ship is just rocking. And you get a little nervous. You've never been on a ship before, right? Can you imagine a ship is nervous, right? But the captain is calm. How does that make you feel? Well, he's been on a ship before. I'm cool. But what if happens if the ship is rolling and rocking and the captain puts on a life jacket? What happens?
I'm freaking out.
He's scared? Right? Well, what happens in the class is the same way. She's uptight, oh gosh, we got more coming. Go ahead and sit here, and if anyone wants to join, we'll have you join right here. So we have some group, they're all comfortable now. So, there you go. And so if you're agitated, if you're irritated, if you're gloomy, if you're depressed, if you're excited, right? Like, tomorrow is going to be the first day of Thanksgiving. It's Friday, and you're just excited about the kids. Have you ever noticed the kids perform less on the day before a holiday than normal? And guess what? So do the teachers. How do I know? Because I know that, remember when you were a senior in high school, and they had this disease they called senioritis? Remember what that was all about?
Yeah.
What happened to you mentally in your effort to get good grades? I'm done. What are they going to do then? Fire me? What does a teacher do when they're about ready to retire? Same problem. Hey, same thing happens right before a holiday, and we've got one coming up next week, so be aware. That's coming. Try to take your emotions out of it. We talked a little bit about teach tubes. We're going to revisit that in the next. We promised this session, but we're really going to do it next session. What is a teach tube?
Something you want to make sure your students know your expectations about.
If you have a procedure, how do you get them to understand it? And you're right. This is our teach tube. Let's practice. Let's do it. Let's go step by step. Good. And then we talked about having a rapport with your students. What does that mean?
Let them know you like them.
Let them know you like them, right? Even if you got to fake it till you make it, right? Lie to your teeth, but they have to be convinced. Unfortunately, it's hard to fake that. You really do need to mean it. And when kids understand that you really love them in a very appropriate way, they'll run through a brick wall for you. They really will.
Yeah, Dad.
All right.
That's me.
We're going to talk about good lesson planning, and with that, we're going to bring Jenny up. Here's the clicker.
Thanks. So, the whole thing about lesson plans, it was one of those dreaded things when we were in credential school that we had to do all these certain lesson plans and turn them in. And the reality is, once we get really in the routine, like I taught English for, 20 years, I didn't really need a lesson plan for like the basic stuff. I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The part that I think everyone, no matter how senior you are, is to remember a couple things to make your lesson plans more effective. I went to a conference, an AVID conference, late in my career, and they had a guy there from a Bay Area school that was specialist in differentiated curriculum. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, I'd never thought about having 3 different prompts for the different levels of writers in my class. And the 3 different levels, they all dealt with the same topic, but the level of I don't want to even say difficulty, because for her it might have been appropriate difficulty, for you it would have been appropriate also. What was it?
Complexity?
Yes, complexity is probably the best word for it, because like I was a good writer, but I wasn't a very good visualizer. And so having me like look at a house and try to describe the rooms to you, I probably couldn't do it. But if it was something like I took a piece of text and had to write about it, I could write for days. So knowing me if I had me as a student, how would I make it challenging for me versus what might be challenging for him? And for me, that was difficult to get a handle on because I thought, well, am I doing a disservice to the student that I gave a fairly simple prompt to? Well, no. If that's the level of their critical thinking skills, I am pushing them, right? I am pushing them. And then I've got the kid over here who's usually done with an essay in 20 minutes and starts bugging all my other kids. How can I make it more complicated for him or her? Okay, that said, you've got to know your kids, right? You've got to know them well. So, know your students. And we're going to talk about the ways you can get some kind of cool ideas on how to get that. Be excited about it, because if you're not excited, they sure are not going to be excited. Probably right here, because we're grouping everybody together. Be excited, at least, and find a connection with them. Let them know why it matters. These kids, and probably we would have benefited from that when we were in school too. Don't tell me to go do this worksheet for a word search, because I'm the kind of kid that's going to go, really, you're wasting my time. You are absolutely wasting my time. And then I will have no respect for you, and I will be an asshole. That's my MO, that's how I operated. So, if you're going to waste my time, tell me why you're wasting my time, make me understand. Because if you're going to tell me I'm just circling words, I'm going to tell you that's really stupid. I'm not going to learn a definition from circling a word. Right? And I'm that kid that would question you on it. So keep that in mind. Let them understand why it's important. I get in this argument all the time with my kid in the car. I'm never going to use this math. Yeah, you are. Let me give you an example. I bought a house in Tower and I was redoing it. I didn't pay attention in geometry and it really kicked me in the butt. I'm sitting in Home Depot and I said, here are my measurements. I need enough drywall for this. And the guy looks at me and he goes, I think you might have done your math wrong. I said, no, I measured it. He goes, well, and this was a small room, maybe 10 by 10. My math had said I needed 500 sheets of drywall. And I'm standing there and he laughed at me and I went, oh, probably should have paid attention in geometry.
I'm an English teacher.
Yeah, whoops, I'm an English teacher. But he laughed and then he redid my math for me, or I kind of guessed. And what's sad is he was closer guessing than I was measuring, but whatever. Be organized. You guys know that feeling when, I'm assuming some of you know this feeling, when you're driving to work and you've had a terrible week and you're not organized and you know walking in you're not organized? Don't you feel like the kids look right through you and then you're frazzled and you're constantly chasing your tail, so you're already tired before the school day's even started, and then by the time the day's over you're like, why did I do that to myself? So be organized. It'll make life easier. Plan for everything that you can. You know, rallies. Like Steve was saying, not only do you need to know that that's going to happen, but your kids need to know. But some things you can't plan for, like the fire alarm. We had it one day, the fire alarm 3 times in one period. I was furious. But then I was like, what good is that going to do? I can't change it. Right? So I just need to be able to wing it. And when I was department chair, I had a teacher who, she's a second career, and she was in business, HR. She's used to things, saying things, and then being done. And her schedule was perfect. And anytime something threw a wrench in it, she had a meltdown. And I had to go in and be her therapist. And I'm like, eventually you're going to not let this bother you, because this is education. So knowing that, always maybe have a little flux time in there, knowing that you might end up with a kid with a bloody nose or whatever. None of that. Can you effectively plan your, like we were 90 minutes. Can I effectively plan 90 minutes? Yes, in the sense that if I know I'm probably going to be interrupted, if my flow is going well, I don't need to worry about it. But if I'm doing something where I am direct teaching, I need to be, if I flip out when a kid walks in and hands me a note, my class is going to flip out. So plan for that. Plan that you know things are may go askew at any point. Make sure all the activities hit all learning styles, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and break it up, transition frequently and smoothly. You know that they say it's 1 minute for every year that they are. So like That's why they say when you put a 3-year-old in timeout, you don't leave them there for more than 3 minutes. So, and then you had a different number last time, Steve. What was it, 15 minutes? Like roughly 15 minutes?
TED Talk limits the presentation to 18. So
18.
yeah, 15 minutes seems to be the cutoff point for a presentation.
Which makes sense. This is something that truly I just kind of stuck in here, but it's something that resonated in my head a lot. 10% students will remember 10% of what they read. It's a pretty low statistic. 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say, and 90% of what they do and say. That's everyone. That's not a particular learning style. That's everyone. So, that said, if you want somebody to remember something, you need to have them use their hands, you need to have them verbalize it, okay, and then all the other stuff with it. I think this is one of the coolest things to remember when you're planning stuff. And you're going to get to know your kids. Some of you have already talked about the one-on-one conversations you've had, different ways that you've gotten to know your kids. One of the things that I've done in the past, but it had to be a class I knew really well, was from Freedom Writers. Has anybody seen that booklet she has? She did a book full of activities, and I ran I think a piece of yarn across my classroom, or whatever I had at the time. And my kids were divided in half. And we started off with, if you like Pepsi, come to the line. And they step up. And then you say, if you like the 49ers, which of course, then they all start barking, but whatever. They go up to the line, you go, okay, step back. Then you say, you have a brother or a family member in the military. And they all step up, whoever does. And I think it was interesting to me because we got into, you've ever had your power cut off. And what was interesting is you see the poor kid looking over at the rich kid, and they're both at the line. And you can just see them going, oh, we have a little more in common than I thought. Lost a relative to drugs and alcohol. That was an amazing revelation for all of them also, and me. We did different stuff like that. Now granted, I've known these kids for years. That's not something you're going to throw out, at anyone. But for me, I felt that it was awesome for them to see how much they had in common versus differences. And you don't have to get as controversial as what we did. You could be really simple, but to like a third grader who's a huge 49er fan or a Raider fan, to see who else might be a Raider fan is kind of cool. Not that that may end up being more problematic than helpful, but getting to know your kids. You need to know their learning styles. We're going to talk about that in a second. Surveys. I know some of you mentioned you already do surveys. Okay, the survey can be for the parent and for the kid, the guardian and the kid. And I was thinking about this actually since last year. How can you do that for an elementary school kid who's perhaps kindergarten, first grade, who isn't going to sit and answer a 25-question survey? I think you could do things like pictures. You could read it to them and tell me put a plus if that's true, a negative if it's not true. We can talk about all the different ways. But you want to get a gist of what the kid finds interesting, and I think it's always interesting to see what the parents have to say about it, because they give you a little insight into their background. Does reading happen in their house? That's a huge one that I used to ask being an English teacher, and it was shocking to me how many kids, their parents don't pick up even a newspaper. Well, that's kind of old now, but. Small group discussions. You guys have talked about having small group talks, and the kid starts going off on a story, and you're like, yeah, and you start sharing with them, connect with them. Pretty much anything can be twisted so that you can relate. And I think some of you heard this. My mom always said, you'll never be able to relate to these kids. I'm like, no, I didn't grow up, like that. But it doesn't take much to sit and listen and be able to say, oh, I had a pet one time, or whatever, and connect with the kids. They, like we talked about them seeing you in Costco, they need to know you're human. And sharing what you're comfortable with is huge for them. Because you reveal a little bit, they're willing to reveal a little bit, or maybe too much. And then one-on-one conversations, I don't know how many people can actually plan those in their day. Like you guys with 40 kids in your class or whatever. I don't know how you'll get that time, but if you get a chance, you're walking out to the field, you're walking to lunch, and you pick a different kid each time to sit and talk to. Something simple as that will resonate with that kid forever. So learning styles, you guys all know there's like a million different tests for this. But the basis of it is there's 3 styles: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic tactile. One of the things I think you would agree with me with is almost every kid benefits from the tactile part. Whether you are a auditory learner, visual learner. I mean, I used to hate group stuff, but I knew that I learned better that way. So, with that said, this is what visual learners do. They obviously learn through seeing and reading. They prefer written instructions. So for those kids, you need to have it up on the board, because they're going to revisit that probably 20 times, even if they don't need to. And they're often good readers. These kids are obviously going to come from families that do a lot more reading and engaging. But some kids will just disappear with their book and go read in the corner. They learn best pictures, illustrations, photos, graphs, diagrams, and maps. I hate math. I hate diagrams. I hate charts. And, you know, going into my master's program, that was not beneficial. I still, to this day, do not like looking at charts. Just tell me. Like, the majority of your kids pick their nose. Okay, cool, I got that. But if you tell me to look at a chart and I'm not that person, I am not a visual learner. And as soon as I realized that, I had to adjust my study skills to that, what little study skills I have. Auditory, obviously they listen. They like to talk on the phone or listen to music. You guys are probably not old enough, well some of you might be, to remember when you had to dial time.
Yes.
Yes.
Popcorn. Yeah.
Popcorn. And then I used to, because I didn't want the phone to ring, so my parents couldn't hear it, I'd be on the phone calling time when they'd call over, and then my parents would never know I was on the phone. Come to find out they didn't know, but at the time I didn't think they knew. And you learn best if you can hear or see the assignment. No, you have to see and hear it. Okay? This will all make sense more in a minute. Auditory learning, discussion. And frankly, a lot of people learn well. So like, Avid has a thing where if, let's say we're a math group and we're all in Algebra 2. I get up and I go, here's my problem. This is where I'm confused, right here. Instead of telling me how to answer it, you guys might say, well, have you tried process of elimination? Oh, so then I try process of elimination. And then that didn't work. And I go, well, that didn't work. And then somebody else can say, well, let's look at our notes, and what about this? Well, you're not giving me the answer, you're making me think. I'm having to walk through it. With this discussion, I will never forget it. So if I'm able to verbalize something, it sticks in my head. Most of your kids are going to be that way too. Recite aloud. Vocabulary, this is probably the best one, or learning their not their alphabet, learning their months. You know, you guys, everything's put to song. When we were kids, it was Grammar Rock. I can still sing those songs to you. And I was, 6.
I play those songs.
I do too, I love them. And my kids, it was such a novel thing that I would play that old cartoon. But they never forgot them. They never forgot conjunction, junction, right? Okay, music is a really cool thing. And I mean, what's to say you can't have the kids create their own? Create their own raps about anything. I mean, as long as it's appropriate. As Steve said, appropriate relationships. Go away, Flash. Teaching others, using flashcards and saying them, and use music in the background if it does not distract. That's one of the things I would put with classroom environment too, is appropriate music. Time to Teach has a whole soundtrack thing they do. They use jazz music. It's all mood type stuff. But the kind of music you like. Obviously, if you're getting ready to have them do testing, you probably shouldn't be doing headbanging music because you're going to lose them. But if you have you might have to do some research, but there's certain classical music that tends to stimulate the brain and all that kind of stuff. Feel free to use that to your advantage. If you need them to be a little more energetic and it's right after lunch, play something that is a little more upbeat. And then this is kinesthetic tactile. They learn through doing. Hands-on activities. They use their hands to build, create, plant, draw, decorate. One of the coolest, time-consuming, fun activities that we've ever done is a physics teacher was teaching gravity and momentum. And she had the kids, she took those, you know those insulation, the foam insulation for pipes that look like tubes? You cut them in half, you give like this table, I don't know, 12 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and paper clips is what I use a lot because I have a ton of them. And I don't tell them anything, I just set them out. And I go, okay, I want you to tell me if it's possible in writing, in a quick paragraph, is it possible to make a roller coaster with one loop and this marble doesn't fall off the track? And inevitably they all say no. Or one kid will say, yeah, it does. But they're all writing on their own. I do not think the marble will stay on the thing, or I do think it will stay on, blah, 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 blah. And then I go, okay, you have 5 minutes. You have to do a roller coaster with at least one loop, and the marble has to stay on there. And the kids are like, oh, okay, cool. Well, they start to figure out real quick that if you just do it this long, it's not going to work. And so then they start getting all creative, and then they're like, can I go off the ceiling? All right. So then they're on their desk, they're putting it off the ceiling, they've got it going like this, then they're all proud. Yeah, come see it, Miss Taylor, blah, blah, blah. Come see it. I'm like, all right, now I want 3. No way. Like, no way? Okay, why don't you try it? Well, inevitably, one kid ends up becoming the leader, or maybe 2 or 3. And then you have the follower, then you have the grunt that does all the work. But at the end, you have them review what they thought in the beginning. And then you have them talk about who took the lead, why they took the lead. All of that stuff was a physics lesson. But they had a blast. They'll be talking about it for days. And they learned about momentum and physics in a way that I actually liked it. Every one of those kids benefited from that activity. The quiet kid that just watched still learned. Right? Still learned. The kid that built was obviously engaged. And the brain behind it, which you know was the smart leader kid sitting back going, the bossy kid, right? That kid learned too. So everybody was hit. And you didn't have to embarrass anyone, but you hit that. That's a type of an activity that hits everyone. And I stole it. I was not creative on that. Read while walking or pacing. That's the kid that can listen to music also usually and still read. I don't know how they do that. Study outside, take notes on lectures, highlight or underline, write summaries, outline chapters, and think of practical applications. These kids have to do. They have to do, and they can't be seated for very long. Here's another one I just stuck in there. Chinese proverb, I hear and I forget. I see, I remember, I do, and then I understand. That can be anything. Something as simple as like English. You can say, okay, we're focused on adjectives today, and we can be in a circle, and we're telling a story, and if we pass the beanbag, when I say stop, that person has to add an adjective to the sentence or to the story. You can do all kinds of stuff where it's active, and they're not just sitting there having to do boring things like defining vocabulary. I don't think we need that yet, so we'll go back to that in a few minutes. This test right here is for you to figure out your learning style. And here's the thing, some of you have done them before, but it changes day to day, and it also changes where we are in our career. You're going to take about 10 minutes, I think, 15, I can't remember how long it takes, to do this. It's also on your syllabus if you can't get this going.
Agenda.
I'm sorry, it's on your agenda. Thank you. Oh yeah, okay.
Oh, I'll take that. While you're at it.
Very nice. Carl wants to dance.
Yeah, there's some.
You need to give us a lot of
Was that you?
I didn't know car alarms had ringtones.
Had a full on beat.
I could see it mixing with Herbie, the Love Bug.
when you finish, we'll take a 10-minute break. So we'll say 25 after.
Teachers' classroom.
Just remember what your result was.
What they have in the walls and stuff. I would move that and take that down.
But it's cool, so we'll go one step. It's a lot. For our kids, because our kids are like, some of them are. They're all used to it because they already have the same teacher, so it's cool. For the most part. So we have the one whole sidewalk, like one row of keypads, and then old maps, Abraham Lincoln rules for the classroom.
That's the only way. That was the same morning.
When you're at a party, well, you actually might have to move that man.
That's the only way.
That was the first one. Like, songs about it.
Is that a Is that
We saw that on dance battle and stuff, like every time there's a wedding. I wake up the next day, like, man, I shouldn't have done that one.
The way you're cutting them, it's like a puzzle. So they have to go
It's stuff that you do every day.
Oh, yeah.
It's all the stuff you do every day.
Trying to do this, like, find more manipulative ways for them to, like, engage with stuff.
My favorite one is, I don't even know, round robin or something, but like, that's all the kids, alright, tell me everything you do, and lock it, so I read one on she's going in a circle for 1 minute, right? They did that, alright, just help them build that, tell me, name the stuff that you guys use to get ready if you're going out to a party, so we're currently for me, right? And I was like, right, cool, you guys get this? Yeah, I was like, tell me everything you remember about the industrialization. So, that's the kind of stuff that's in the file. It was cool.
And it's just verbal.
No, they can write it or they can verbal. There's parents for it, where they write it, and then we make it an activity where we have the notes. One of our kids put the best in the process. I was like, what? Yeah, that's cool. I have the book if you want to.
Again, when there was one from under your thumb.
14,000 cities and counties and say, then they started seeing a problem, but they couldn't do anything about it.
Is that just Madera or is that everyone?
For PE, did you guys both get kinesthetic or no? I feel like that
I
you
did,
would
but I
have
was like, I was 30, 40. So kind
You're
of.
pretty like.
I was 65.
So let's say
I'm definitely a hands-on person. I like to put things together. So like if I buy something that needs to be put together, I like to try to figure it out for myself. Sometimes I have to go the direction.
Worksheet's gonna
If it's
grow
totally
dendrite.
but
And she had
I
some
like to figure it out myself.
I'm trying to do like face and
references,
figure
yeah.
out for them to like physically like engage with it. Like celebrate pick up your notes or like they're making another play. So they're gonna be cutting stuff out and gluing it and putting them on put them in order now which ones do they go with and stuff like that. So like for now I think that's something a little bit more working than just
Your English?
history.
or not hiring that extra pair, first, it's counterproductive.
I've never had a customer school that works with science and
I had to back in school.
It's It's because they don't have the foundational skills to build it. You can't multiply. How are you gonna do chemistry? How are you gonna do like?
That's what I would like to
You
know.
have chemistry, right? I hated conversion.
From unit to unit, did they show you the ladder to go from the base unit down to smaller units? You go to the right, and then you go to the left to go to bigger units. Have you ringing a bell?
One thing I remember is my physics teacher with our tables on that.
Whoa,
It
I
was
want
like
to do that.
like first day of school. He was like, it has nothing to do with it, but it was cool. What was it? He lit the tables on
To
fire.
get your
The black tables that they have in the science class. He was awesome. And I had just a bucket full of chemistry. A 2-story all my kids would come outside and pop them on. Right, probably like
It has to be clear.
or whatever, like the arch or whatever.
You know what? Yeah, I don't
You
believe
had to go out there and hit
There are studies.
piece of tape or
Scientific studies.
measuring tape.
Yeah, but for me, like, yeah, no.
He did a lot of it.
I had a professor state, he taught how the blood flows through your body.
I said, you can find links for me for any kind of instrument. You can use one as long as it's not weak or
I went outside in the tub and we did a
Where it's
whole top
Words.
you know, ropes and we had this and that and we all stood where we had we all had a job and we all had to go.
But it's funny how, I don't have,
You know what?
I had a single cell phone.
Because you got it. You were.
I showed everything that
I was pretty and I think that was like covering the professors, especially the college.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like, okay.
But I haven't done everything, because I go tell you all the time, or try to.
I think our math
Tried
classes
to be
were out on the football field
All
today
the
doing
time. Now, every once in a while, I'll go off from a backpack, but I'm like, let's take your backpack.
Sorry, I was
There's not an
sure
appointment here. Well, that's.
Well, you do ask, right?
Yeah.
What?
You given it to say so.
Your chemistry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Fresno.
Did you really? Tammy liked him. Oh, funny.
I remember my biology teacher.
She did?
I remember mine, but all for the wrong reason. She was bad.
And her commander is Miller.
It's one of those forgotten ones. 'Cause, like, they give you the option, like, you,
Some people took zoology, I think.
And that
Maybe that
Garrison,
was
he's a
the
great
I
guy.
don't think we have to.
Sergeant Treat really likes him.
they give you a lot of options so that you don't have to. Because no one likes to chemistry. Because one, it's almost as basic as science. It's a lot harder.
Remember biology?
Oh, really?
Is that what it is? The earth science and physics?
Yeah. Earth science and then bio, and then you can take physio. But like now, if you're doing GSS standards, everyone's gonna have to take physics.
Yeah, that's what she
Everyone's gonna have to take physics. So
He said he flies by.
they're trying to get students used to taking physics now.
How are you? Good. Yeah. The guy they had before.
I have no idea how I'm gonna present that. Moles, because it's hard enough for them to use scientific notation.
Oh, I know his,
Christine and I were,
I
had lots of classes together.
They can hardly
okay, we'll go ahead and start, maybe we can
the mold, that's all
get out of
it is.
here.
You guys wouldn't be disappointed if we ended 10 minutes early, would you?
You're all on. So here's what I need you to do. How many of you were visual, primarily visual? Wow. How many were primarily auditory? There's only a few of you. How many of you were tactile? Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I have auditory over here. You're not going to be permanently moved. It's just for this. But I want all the auditory people here. I want all the tactile there, and I'm going to move the visual to right there. Go to the table that you were primarily your test results. Right here's visual. And you don't have to move. Uh-oh. I think I'd have this whole sticky thing down.
Or not.
Or not. Are you? There's a couple. Who else was auditory? You were. And there was. I think you were.
This was somebody's.
I was right. Go here then and help them.
Where's visual?
Visual's right there. Alright, so here's what you're doing. You have a table, you have a piece of paper, and you have a marker. I want you guys to come up with ideas of activities that fit your interest. That make sense?
Activities that fit your interests.
Yeah, so if you had a class full of your type, what are some activities you could do with them that would fit and meet their needs? Just the type that you are. We'll give you 7 minutes.
I actually like word searches because it helps me like see how the word is spelled.
But see, that's just different personal.
Because again, they're pointless. I would have been like, I'm not doing the from work. That's a waste of my time.
I only like it because I'm horrible at spelling, and you see the way you have to look at how it's spelled.
Slideshows, PowerPoint
Yeah, I'm
presentations.
horrible at spelling. Just because I'm slightly dyslexic,
Why are
so
you writing?
I constantly flip everything else.
See, I don't know so I can do them all on the phone as a teenager. It was brainless.
Drawing pictures.
Do you write videos?
Or you can just like powdering it out loud. That's how I'm reading it.
I've got feedback and flow on it, and do, I've got basketball.
I only like books.
Little books.
I only like books when I can watch them, even though the movies are never anything like the book. When I can watch the movie and then compare how bad they are with the entire movie.
Actually, what I do for fun is read.
Who's your kid?
That I saw in middle school.
Yes, I like it when manuals give you like pictures of what stuff should look like.
Flashcards, there you go. Flashcards. Color coding things.
Or like a model, like they have like review songs, like
So many
I like
Sure, we say it on the camera. Kagan.
So I know what it actually is versus what
We love Kagan.
You ever get a used book that
So probably like,
has anything highlighted? What's wrong
text
with it?
differentiation.
no, I'm thinking
I get
of
Post-it
cards.
notes
And you can do the spelling.
because I don't like damaging
You
books.
can do whiteboard,
I
yeah.
don't like books, but I don't like
write
damaging
books.
them.
I don't write them books, I don't like them.
I don't know how to word that.
I've kept them all.
When I was in college, I took notes and I never reviewed them. But I found that having to write the roads.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, even if I don't look back at them again, writing always it like, that's why when I'm telling kids.
No, they handshakes and stuff, we joke about it.
Well, you see it once, you write it, it goes up to your brain twice. Your neurons and your sight neurons.
Well, it's hard to
It's the kinesthetic
no
part of the
one is one
activity
type
too.
of learner
No, it's true.
because like all of my scores were like 30, 45, 25, they were all right within the, there was nothing over 50 to be like, this is your dominant one.
So the point of this is though, is
Oh, that's how I was
to, you're strategizing about these
They're just coming up with
strategies.
ideas that they can do
And
in
you're
class.
gonna hear ideas from the other ones, so you can start having a library. Huh, what do I do for this kid? What do I do for that kid?
So we would have,
It's just like,
math and
so anything that you.
Title, very good.
So that's the thing I like about history is because you got a lot of pictures, you got a lot of timelines, you got a lot of maps. I was a huge fan of history.
When you don't want to be the one that when there's people standing there, did you go and check it? And they're like, did you check it? You know? Yeah, we're gonna be standing here.
So number 4.
visual, but I don't read every word.
Are you guys tactile learners? Stop touching. Stop.
Oh, nice to stand here and look fun. Right?
No wonder the PE people are here.
Auditory learners.
Experiments.
Yeah, I'd rather write notes by hand than type them.
I can't, typing doesn't do me any good.
What is it that they call math?
It might help me read them later on.
Yeah.
The first time I sent
Yeah, I never
college,
My chicken scratch.
it was
You know, it's a
very
friend of mine.
definitely, you should take notes on your side, game shows.
All my notes for this class, they're all drawn on, like,
What is that called? When you, instead of writing out like text, you draw picture notes?
Graphic.
Like you did with the. No, graphic, yeah, graphic.
Doodle notes.
yeah, cause I all the time.
So I'm like, okay, shall I tell the letter you're going for?
You know, my kids are presenting, I'll be drawing on that my little grading chart and they'll, I mean, every time you listen, okay, that's all I do. Like, how do you listen? Yeah, I mastered this. You haven't yet.
They actually were calling them academy. And this one was health science. And so PE, they were learning
Adjust.
anatomy. And the way they did it was they went to the gym. And they teach you how to exercise certain muscles, only certain muscles. And the next day,
Feel that muscle.
next day they were right. Where's your hamstring? Where does it so? Oh, that's my note. Exactly. And so that tactical way of learning
Different ways of.
memorizing everything. You can imagine, right? And then you learn
Well, did you notice that you probably were
that was interesting to see.
I can print on
but we usually have.
whiteboard better than I can print on
Muscles right here.
paper. Yeah.
Do you do the
Oh, you gotta have a hold. on that.
Well, because it's your, like,
Those
placeholder.
two classes. Yeah. They did the same thing.
End of the day, you
very
got
much
a little black mark on your.
Oh, you need to go.
writings like this or really small.
What medicine did Romeo take?
I just saw this whiteboard was all messed up.
See, I struggle with whiteboards because I always start out writing really, really big and then like everything at the bottom is like super crunched together.
That's one of the skills I'm
Like, the words are big and then it's not straight.
It's kind of like a reverse, what is it, site test? Like DOB site test? Instead of getting bigger, it gets smaller.
I have a student, she doesn't this year, but last year she's always coming and go. Can I write your whiteboard? She got tired of their stuff on it.
Oh yeah, dirty whiteboards drive me insane.
No, it wasn't dirty whiteboard, it was just the writing. Are we done with that yet? Are we done with
Oh,
that
it
yet?
was distracting.
Well, then she's, has a ton of attention.
Now we have to talk about.
Okay, Jen, they're ready.
There's quite a few expenses.
You got me excited about going 10 minutes early. I want to make sure we do.
And stuff like that, and some districts, and then you figure
Good
every
whiteboard, probably.
section a teacher teaches the same.
You can have that all decorated. It's in
All
one
right,
color.
stay where you are, but one person from your group.
Kylie, put that closer to the screen.
Actually, I'll make this. Well, no, we're gonna do it what I said last time.
There you go. You put it right on
That's
there.
not bad. Awesome for ours.
Put it on the whiteboard, right? Keep going.
Yeah.
Because
There you go.
And then I don't know if you guys can hang yours up over there.
Do you have a
It'll
safety
stick.
pin?
It'll stick.
Safety pin.
Kind of did it sideways.
Oh!
We have the
You have a
old
push
fashioned
pin?
one.
Translate back to
Or tape.
All right, so.
Here you go, Dave.
Oh, stapler, that one.
There you go.
I'm like, you know what? Improvise, overcome, and adapt.
You know, I'm gonna say because they write in their English, but I'm.
Whoever your one person is, that person is staying with the poster. And you guys are gonna rotate the tables. You'll just get up and walk, because I want you guys to get up and move around. So this table will come here, and here, whoever it is here that's gonna present this. And then you guys will go over there, you guys will go over there, and then we'll rotate you, so that you hear all three, or all together.
You got it.
So who's gonna be the speaker here? Who's gonna be the speaker here? You are? Alright, so you guys are gonna go over there, you guys are gonna
Here's the
go over
poster, read it.
Like I said.
They're not visual learners.
That's okay, they can read it. They're auditory learners, they should be able to read it without me explaining anything.
No, we don't need
You tactile learners?
Yeah, you're rotating clockwise. Clockwise.
Teacher.
Weird. All I know is a digital clock. Which way?
Okay, that's kind of scary true.
What we said, what we
Okay, here we go.
Alright, here you go, my tactile learners. Alright, what is the visual learning poster? And so we did, I didn't do, the girl did. You do stuff with your eyes. Look at stuff. So like saying 1 + 2 = 3, you have manipulatives like either like playing cards or cubes or whatever to represent instead of just numbers. And there are a variety of things such as models and manipulatives, color coding things to make it easier for your eye to find what you need to read over. Flashcards, different color, like if you have flashcards, doing different colored flashcards for different subject areas to help you understand it and focus in. Manuals that have like pictures and step-by-step instructions and step-by-step visuals. Books, depending on who you are, we talked about how some of us really like watching a movie that's based off a book and then reading the book and then criticizing the movie for how bad it is based off of how it's nothing like the book, but you can like see the movie playing in your head as you're reading the book. Drawings, maps, and maps kind of goes with timelines for like if you're a history major, or if you're big on history. Timelines and maps within history books are always very helpful for visual learners. Slideshows and presentations, word searches, because especially if you're not very good at spelling, searching for how the word is spelled, that visual aspect helps you understand how to spell that word. Graphic organizers, charts, of course pictures, TV, movies, videos, I think by text I think they meant like actual books, but I'm not 100% sure. Post-its, I personally use a lot of post-its in all my stuff, because if it's not on a colored post-it, then it's not that important, and I'm probably not going to remember it. But I've got like 50 post-its on my calendar on my desk, because each one's a different color, and it means that's an important thing I don't forget. If you're a fan of writing in your book, I'm not a fan of writing in my book, I do post-its in my books, I don't like writing in books, but if you like to write in books or write lecture notes, write my pieces versus typing, kind of that motion, that visual motion, seeing how it's done, kind of connects it better to your mind versus typing it, including images and graphics with notes, or if you're, there's a more popular thing that's for people who don't like traditional notes, but they're like a visual note taker, so like kind of like that pouching stuff where they draw the notes and they don't actually use that many words, they just do visuals to represent what the lecture is saying.
Awesome.
They're just making the number.
Yeah, the formation,
Okay, we'll rotate
their
this.
numbers, and then they have to say, may I have the second grader that when he gets, whenever he does not trade.
Okay, we'll wrap it up. We're going to rotate one more time clockwise. Go ahead.
I have before, I've got so many things for.
Ready? Break.
I'm joking laughing at you because I realized no one moved when you said it.
Everybody's looking at me. I'm like,
Yeah.
You pushy tactiles.
Alright. Now that I choked. Okay, so we were visual learners, and so to represent that we did a couple graphics, and like your eyes, you learn through your eyes, we learn through seeing and touching things, so instead of seeing 1 + 2 = 3, maybe you have something like Pokemon cards, baseball cards, and you have 1 baseball card + 3 baseball cards equals 3 baseball cards.
To show them the concept behind
And then instead of traditional notes, which is, we also have it here where we said handwritten notes, like visually seeing yourself write out the notes versus typing them. And then if you're not into either of those styles, there is the more modern where you, instead of having a ton of words as your notes, you actually draw pictures to represent what the words are, and you have graphic notes instead. It's kind of like an adult version of like a movie game in your notes. Including images with your notes, and especially like when you're having like presentations, having visuals of what those things represent to make that connection for your students or for yourself even. Applying to history, having timelines and maps to connect those different historical events and kind of be able to see them chronologically. A lot of timelines give like give little snippet pictures of what happened or an important event during that time. Writing notes in your books or on your lecture notes if you need. I'm personally not a fan of that. I do post-its on everything. Like post-its that are all different colors for different things that are important versus different things that are less important. It depends on what color's already on my calendars. But like if it's something that's really super important, I'll pull like a red post-it out and write on that and leave that on my calendar because I know on a white calendar I can miss it and post it. Or like if I have just an everyday reminder, I'll pull one of my more fun post-its and just set it in the corner of the calendar with a note on it. Like right now, like I have orange lights up in my room, so it has a note that says on the casual note pad, it says shut off lights before you leave kind of a thing. Whereas like I have a field trip coming up, so I have a note that's bright yellow, it's at the top, says 5th grade field trip, this date, this time, fine coverage kind of a thing. Using models and manipulatives, color coding things, whether it's your flashcards or your flashcards, or using highlighters to color code. I do that a lot when I take notes. I'll write things in pen and then I'll take different colored highlighters and highlight them in different colors to help me focus on what I'm trying to kind of hone in on. Manuals that have step-by-step visuals are really awesome, especially like on how-to things, like you're building like a cabinet or something and it has like the steps to pictures of how to do it. I personally like those. We talked about which connects the books and the video. Some of us said we just like to read. Others said, like myself, I like to watch a movie that's based off a book, read the book, and then criticize how the movie is nothing like the book, and look at different aspects that I like better than the others. Using drawings, slideshows that have pictures, word searches. I personally commented that I like those actually because it allows you to visually see how the word is spelled out and search for it. Yeah, spelling patterns, exactly. Organizers, charts, pictures.
What do you mean? And that one of those.
We use lots of algebra tiles. Algebra tiles and they build the equations.
Alright, we almost done? Wow, you got through that time fast. Alright, go back to your seats, your original seats.
I made it through an IEP presenting my portion in 35 minutes more time. So.
Pretty good. I don't remember IEPs very well.
My counterpart took 40 minutes explaining his, and I got through everything.
Girl, that's right. Go ahead and finish what you're doing. I'm just going to keep talking. All right, so here's what I have a question for you guys. Obviously a high school kid can get online and do this survey. Even a junior high kid. And your kids are probably far more technologically savvy than mine were back when I was in the classroom. But how would you do an interest survey or learning style test for like kindergartens, first grade, second grade? Like how could you do that? Because it's going to be some kind of an adaptive. You're going to have to make it somehow adaptive.
Like give them the have the questions and then like give them like a happy face or a sad face to color in. Like I like to read. Happy face, sad face.
That's a great idea. And this also I would keep in mind you may have to read it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, because I teach first grade, and sometimes I feel like the students say what you want to hear. Do you like to read? Yes, I'd love to recite this.
So I wonder, and I don't know if you could get the parents to do it, but, because I know that when I sent stuff home, it never came back. But they were high schoolers too, so if you had 10 simple things, and you ask the parent as part of their homework that night to do it with their child. And then I'm wondering if you could eliminate the try to please the teacher kind of deal. I just don't know if you'd ever see it again. But I think at that age, the parents are still somewhat involved, and they have their little, I'm assuming, folders with all their work and stuff. So you could have a parent do it with them, or a guardian, or and I think, you know, as simple as you can make it, because the gist isn't to make the test difficult, the gist is to get the information from it. Does that make sense? Did we kind of cover, because I'm assuming any adaptation for special ed, PE, whatever it is, you just have to think and be a little creative in how you're going to approach that and get your answers. And you know, like, what you guys would find important for you is very different than what I would find different in an English teacher. But I'd want to know, if I was a PE teacher, is, you know, what kind of exercise do you do as a family? Do you do bike riding? Do you do anything? You know, what kind of foods do you normally eat? Because then you're going to know, like, most of them are McDonald's foodies, you know. Or do they eat traditional food every night? That's going to also explain different things for you. You know, when your kid is a heavy carb kid and then after lunch they're like this, which was me, you know, it's going to make sense to you. I can't remember who I heard, if it was a comedian or what, but he talked about how he was Hispanic in a non-Hispanic area and that he always had burritos to eat. And everybody else wanted his burrito, but he was embarrassed because he thought he was odd man out. And he didn't eat school lunches because his mom always sent him with a lunch. And yet he didn't realize that everybody else was like, dang, I wish I had that burrito versus this nasty school food. But it's all perception. And if that's all they know, if all they know, you know, like tuna casserole, what I grew up on, you know, it explains a lot about my body stature. The other thing that is really beneficial, a lot of you already do this, and so it may be redundant to you, is the questionnaires. And again, you've got to adapt, because you want to know what the kid perceives. Like, what is your goal? Most of them are going to say, I want to be a fireman, a cop, whatever. You want to know what they think, and then when you ask their parent, it's like, whoa. I know one of the stats that like blew me away when I was teaching is, if I asked my kids how many of you want to go to college, all of them raised their hand. Thanks. But when I asked their parents the same question on a questionnaire, their parents were less than 20% thought they'd go to college. Their parents. And I'm like, whoa, that's a huge discrepancy, and how was I going to bridge that gap? And you know, you're having to change culture, you're having to change valley culture, because this is not a college-going culture here. You know, you're dealing with a lot of things. And so how the parent sees it and how the kid sees it isn't necessarily anywhere close to one another. Find out about your students from them and their parents. You should review that and their interests. Like, if a kid the family is a big biking family, they like to go on their bike rides every night, then don't pair them with some sedentary kid that only sits on video games. You know, I mean, or maybe pair them because they might strike a balance. But the fact is, you need to know. I need to know that you're like super active and involved in sports and everything, and I need to know that, you know, you're part of your brain. And I need to know that to make sure my assignments and activities hit all of these people's interests. And how do you do that? You think about, you've got kids that are first language, you've got kids that perhaps are on the spectrum that are mainstream, you have kids that have never picked up a book in their life with their parents, you're the only reading experience. I mean, you guys are given so many things to overcome on top of trying to get these kids to meet the state standards. And you got, I mean, if you think about the differences you have in your classroom, and people wonder why we can't just, you know, why all our kids aren't testing in the 90th percentile, well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen in the best of situations. And I would argue that these kids that we work with here at Madera Central, those kids are the ones that are going to respond the most to you putting the time in. You're not going to have a parent beating on the door because their kid didn't make, you know, the Fresno Bee Academic All-Stars. They probably don't even know it exists, some of them. But you have such a hill to climb. And I think these are all tools that if you use them, you're going to reach those kids far more individually. Is it a lot of work? Yes. Is it a lot of work on the front end? Yes. And I think when you do this, you're going to be shocked at what you find out. And when you do the learning assessments, you're going to find that it was probably split about how it was in here, because that's just kind of the general gist of society. Pretty much did that. So why do a survey? You want to know how supportive the parents are at home. If you get a, oh, my husband and I work all the time, you know, we don't have a lot of time, they're gonna feel guilty because they want to do more, but we can't, you know, some families, they're gonna work. Some families, the oldest has to take care of the kids. So know what you're getting, what they're getting at home. I found really quickly that it was futile if my kid had to leave the classroom and go work. It was futile for me to punish them for not doing their homework. They're doing a heck of a lot more with their families and for their families than my one little assignment of homework is going to matter. And I had to, could I make excuses for that child? No, because if I'm requiring it of everybody, I had to be fair. But I could work out things with this child. You know, hey, come in at lunch, I'll help you do this assignment, whatever. But being aware of what your kid's situation is huge, because they don't all face the same struggles. What barriers to the success are the parents noticing? My child has trouble reading, my child has trouble with the math, whatever that the parent identifies. What interests and what activities? And if you find a kid that is not involved in activities but has the time, that's jump in. Try to get them involved in something. It'll make a difference in their life tremendously. So when you're creating a lesson, you guys know what objectives, what standards. That's the gist. We're adding even more to that. What activities are going to get you to that goal, and how can I hit all the learning types? You guys just walked around and saw all the different activities. So why not merge a couple of them to do the same lesson? And then you're going to hit all your kids. And if you noticed, a lot of you were had feet in both, at least 2 of the types, sometimes 3. That's how your kids are going to be too. So the more interest you hit, the more learning styles you hit, the more you're going to have them engaged. Do you need to accommodate? You know that's part of your lesson plans. And how are you going to assess it? Everything doesn't have to be a quiz. Everything doesn't have to be written. I would suggest the writing, but for example, an exit ticket. Let's say with what we did today, I could say, here's a little slip of paper. I want you to tell me 2 things you learned today. You hand it to me as you're walking out the door. Boom, boom, boom. I'm checking for understanding, but I'm also holding you accountable for what we just did. Something as easy as an exit ticket. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you're doing everything you're supposed to do in checking for understanding, making sure that they got the lesson. And you can look at that when you go back and go, yep, 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 oh no, I need to meet with this kid. He's missing it completely. You can also do it with writing. I did a lot of writing, obviously, English teacher, but some of the stuff I learned from their writing was not always. One kid, a twin, straight A's, walks out, hands me a paper. It was their exit ticket. They had written an essay, timed essay, and I didn't read it. I'm like, thank you, have a great day, thank you. Sat down at my desk. It was the end of the day. No, it was right before lunch, and I start flipping, and I happened to look at her pic. Something caught my eye, and she basically, it was a suicide letter, and I was like, oh crap. So I immediately called the counselor, called the school. She had taken off walking home. Well, I taught at West Campus, so we're out in the country like this. And she was on her way home. And thankfully, one of her friends saw her, picked her up and said, oh no, you're not going home alone. Went with her. And by the time we got the parent involved and everything, we were able to, somebody jumped in and helped her. But I was like, oh my God, what if I'd not even seen that? Like, I was so, you know, usually stacking crap and putting it on my desk, and the stack just got bigger. But as an exit ticket, you can take 2 seconds and just look and maybe, sorry, I'm spitting, and catching up on what's going on. Timing is key, minute for each age. And break it up. You don't necessarily have to get the kids up. I had this one teacher next to me, she drove me crazy. Now she has a friggin' business, but anyway. I read it the other day and I went, are you kidding me? But she would take her class out in the middle of class, because we had 90-minute classes, which is long. She'd stop them, they'd all go outside, she'd let them play football, whatever, for 5 minutes. And then she'd bring them back in. And she was convinced that that activity helped them refocus. Meanwhile, every class around her was completely disrupted because her kids were out there screaming and playing football. And so I was a little irritated by that. I understand what she was trying to do, but you don't necessarily have to have your kids get up and do calisthenics, right? If you change the brain activity, it's the same, it serves the same purpose. So instead of like standing up and talking like I'm doing and boring the hell out of everybody, we do something that involves getting up or just changing speeds. Like I could have you guys pair share, I could have you pair read, I could have you do all kinds of things just to change the speed of things, and you will keep them from disengaging with you. And keep it moving. You'll get better and better at this as time goes on, but realize that when they start getting squirrely, it's time to change it. Okay, and do it quick, do it smooth, try to do it quietly, and they'll get used to it because you'll have taught them through Teach-Tos how you're going to transition from thing to thing. And notice when you are losing them. This is you. Pass off.
Right. Let's do this.
Try. You do now.
Nice shot.
Thank you.
What letter was that?
All right, draw that on a piece of paper.
Trying to do the math
Are we solving it? Or are we
Let's
just
do it
drawing?
together.
Oh, okay.
So, how many times does 36 go into 72?
Two.
All right, so we put the 2 up here, and we multiply it, and we get 72, and then we subtract 0, and then what do we do?
Bring down the other 0.
All right, how many times 36
All the
go into
arrows.
0?
Right.
And then what do we do?
Bring down the 9.
All right, how many times 36 go into 9? 0. And then what do we do?
Bring down 3.
All right, now what do we do?
Divide 36 into 93.
So it's how many times?
2.
2, right? So we get 72, and then what do we do?
Subtract.
Whoops. And then what do we do?
Bring down the 6.
All right, now what?
4.
No, 6.
All right, let's try 6. And so now I have a remainder of 10, 36, right?
Correct.
Not a waste that you can do that. Okay. Now imagine that you have just given a problem.
Remainder?
It goes in even. It goes in even.
Yes.
It's 216, yeah.
Yeah, it's even.
I love when we get to correct the teacher.
Right, 21, right.
Testing you.
Yeah.
Hey, how about this? I threw out a number and I got it to go in evenly. How's that work?
Not bad, not bad.
I'll take the credit.
Subconscious working right.
So, imagine that you've given this as an in-print project, and now somebody's raising their hand. Inevitably. I don't understand. All right. So I'm going to give you some foreshadowing, because I'm really an English teacher, not a math teacher, into next session, and we're going to talk about step by step. But I come over here and I look at a problem and I said, oh, that looks really good, but you need to review step 3. Where's step 3?
I don't know.
Write it down.
No, so I said right there.
Well, technically step 3 would be subtracting.
Okay, you're in the 4th grade. You gonna figure that one out?
Well, because you go step 1, it says 36 going to 7. No, so it says 36 going to 72. Yes.
But if
So
fourth grade
36
doesn't know
times
it's going
times.
into what is going into.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have. They would get confused because I'm confused. Because you and I have a debate about it. How do we fix this?
Right down.
Step 1.
All right. Step 1, step 2,
Draw pictures,
step 3,
arrows.
step 4. Okay, very good. All right. Now, the tendency when you give some direct instruction, you spend 10 minutes directing. All right, guys. I do. You show some samples. We do. Let's do a few together. All right. Now you do. Right. As soon as you say, all right, I want you to do problems 7 through 10. What happens?
I don't know what to do.
The helpless hand raiser goes up. Is it always the same people?
Yes.
Right? And by the way, teach twos, you want to teach them how to raise their hand. But this one, and then you have Horseshack in the back. Ooh, 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 ooh. You don't even know what that is. Right? And Lazy Eagle.
Right?
Yeah, that right here.
Get that, and you get it.
And they're the same ones every time, right? Every time, every time, every time. Why? You're making an error that you're not realizing. Because you're nice people and very hard. As soon as you teach it, the same 6 people raise their hand because they know you're going to come around and reteach it. All right, let's see what's going on over here. And and now I'm going to spend 10 minutes reteaching. What's happening to the rest of the zones? This is red over here, but it's green everywhere else. This is only 1 of 5. Now I got to come over here. What am I doing? Reteaching it again. And then I'm coming over here and I'm Is there any wonder why you guys go home exhausted? You've taught the same lesson in 30 minutes 7 times to the same kids that always raise their hand. Why do they raise their hand? There might be a lot of psychological and emotional needs and reasons that they're raising their hand every time you finish. But according to psychology, they're getting positive reinforcement for their behavior. What's their behavior? I raise my hand, the teacher spends 10 minutes with me. That's a positive reinforcement. Okay? How do we eliminate that? How do we tell the helpless hand raiser stop? One is, and we'll talk about this next time, is step by step. Okay? Step by step. And the second is praise, prompt, and leave. Praise, prompt, and leave. And why do we start with praise?
Fulfill that.
Because human nature automatically starts with what's wrong, not what's right. We automatically start. Human nature, I would say, I'm not going to say all of us, but most of us in the room, when we come over, oh, I see your mistake. Oh, here's where you goofed up. Oh, here's the mathematical issue. What are we doing? We're identifying the issue. In our mind, we're doing good teaching, but we are doing the second mis-reinforcement error. The first one is positive reinforcement for the behavior we don't want. The second is we're coming over and immediately finding what's wrong. And if you're a math, how many of you struggled with math when you were in school? How many of you hated math because you struggled with math? And now I'm gonna go deep. You ready? I'm gonna get on my sermon box. Ready? Check this out. This is a life lesson. All of us carry negative labels in our mind about ourselves. Never ever tell anybody what those labels are. But we use a confirmation bias to confirm our labels. In other words, we look through tinted glasses and filter out everything, but what confirms our assumptions. So the story goes that this wife and husband, second, third year of marriage, and she had a label inside that her husband didn't know about, But her label was, I'm irritating. She thought of herself as irritating. And she looked for evidence. Her husband would come home from work. How was work? How was work? Sit down. And then what does he do? Grabs the newspaper or magazine and flips the TV on and she's getting all kinds of feedback that confirms her label. I'm irritating. Look at that. He's home for 10 minutes and I'm already irritating him. And finally one day she bursts into tears. I'm so sorry I'm irritating you. And he looks at her and says, what are you talking about? I know I'm irritating you and I don't mean to, but I don't even know what I'm doing that's irritating you. Are you kidding me? This is the best part of my day. You have no idea how hard it is to go to work. And I sometimes carry that home. It has nothing to do with you. Well, how do you get labels? There are really three ways. One of them is we give into ourselves as a result of something. We are walking to school and we stumble. Oh, I'm clumsy, right? Another is somebody gives it to us, right? And we've heard of parents saying, "You're never amount to anything. You're stupid. You're dumb," right? And a third is just through experience. Okay, we take these labels, and here's the reality: they're probably not true. They're probably not true. I will tell you that one label I carried as a kid that I now have tossed is I thought I was dumb. I thought I was dumb. I try hard in school, get C's and D's and whatever, and I couldn't figure it out, and I thought I was dumb. And I went to college, and my motive was just survive. And you know how people graduate magna cum laude and cum laude? I graduated college, praise the Lord.
Amen.
And some of my friends graduated, thank the Lord. Okay? And then I went to graduate school. And I was a whole lot different. All of a sudden I was a straight A student. First time in my life, straight A student. I got an A minus and I was disappointed. Right? First, that was the only bad grade I got. A minus was A's. And then I keep hearing reinforcement to the new label. Smart. And I keep hearing it. Wow, you're really smart. Rally, you really know. My wife the other day, we were talking about Castle Air Force Base, and I said, oh, you would love this airplane that does this, and it's ginormous, and propellers are backwards, and it never dropped a bomb in anger, and there's this other plane over here, it flies 3 times the speed of sound. That's over 2,100 miles an hour. I'm kind of, we're talking about going and taking the kids there, and she goes, man, when you retire, you probably just need to go back to college and teach U.S. history. You're really smart. I mean, she says this. Yeah. But that label of I'm dumb is gone. We all have labels. And I would actually, as I'm telling you on my sermon, my soapbox here, I would actually challenge you to think about the labels that you have, because you all have them, the negative ones, and reevaluate whether they're really true or not. And if they're not, you need to get rid of them. Because first we believe it, then we look for evidence that confirms it. And the sad truth is the third thing we do is live up to that label or down to it. Whatever that label is, we live up to that or down to that label. Okay? We talked about, several of you raise your hand, you struggle with math, don't like math, and I come over and say, oh yeah, I see your mistake. What did I just do? That's a reinforcement error. What would the kid that struggles with math do?
See, I'm done.
Yep. See. So, we want to change that. Okay? With a praise, a prompt, and leave. Praise, prompt, and leave. So how do we praise? We need to come up with and start with what they did right before we correct what they did wrong. Unfortunately, that might be, well, your name is spelled right on your paper.
Or you have it out.
It is parenting.
Great job getting your paper and pencil out.
I'm glad you're here.
Hey, you wrote it down correctly. All right. But if you have, and we're going to talk about this step-by-step lesson planning, if you have this by step, you can say, oh, Johnny, step 1 and 2 is perfect. What I want you to do is revisit the directions for step 3, and I'm going to come back in a moment. Got it? And then what do I do? Lead. How much time did that take?
20 seconds.
Okay, so what was happening before? My helpless hand raiser went up, I went over, helping Johnny, and how much time am I spending here? 5, 7 minutes. And then I'm doing it how many times? And what's happening to the rest of the class while I'm over here doing this? They're going crazy, right? They're going to start talking. So, praise, prompt, lead. Oh, Johnny, I see that steps 1, 2, and 3 are correct. Very good. What I want you to do is review step 4. It's on the board, and I'll come back to you in just a moment. And I'm gone. How much time did that take?
10 seconds.
Maybe even less. All right? So, here's what we need to do. I want half of you to stand up, and the other half to stay seated. Do you need a partner? Next time we're going to practice this a little more in depth. Alright, so I want you to walk away from your partner.
Wait.
Say hi, Larry. Oh, wait.
Alright, so those of you that are sitting down, I want you to raise your hand like Horchak. Alright, teachers come in. A praise. A prompt. Lead. Too slow. Try it again. Too slow. Way too slow. Try it again. Alright, so raise your hand like I just don't care. Hey, go in. Praise. Good. Prompt. Lead.
I'll be back. Check if I can fit number 4.
Yeah. Okay, sit down for a moment and we'll switch in just a second. But what is it that why is it taking longer?
Because we're trying to figure out what we're saying.
All right, now check this out. We'll practice with the real problem next time. But there's another problem that teachers have. I'm not going to say the public, but teachers have. Y'all talk too much. Too many words. Why is that a problem? Your heart is so amazing. It's so awesome. And you want to engage your students. And I love that about you. That's why we all became teachers. That's why we get along so well, right? Y'all are nice people. Okay? But you can't talk too much. How long did it take me? Like 5, 6 seconds, right? Oh, hey, that looks good. Steps 1 and 2 are perfect. I want you to look at the directions for step 3 and I'll be back in a second. Where am I going?
Depending on what it is, if you're not quite sure yourself, you may have to stay and look for
You may have to look for the problem a little bit. We'll practice that. But the actual conversation is 6, 7, 8 seconds. But we have a tendency to say, oh, look at step 3. Yeah, what did I say on step 3? Yeah. Let me show me how you do step 3. Okay, oh no, don't forget to, right, what are we doing? And now I'm right back into the old habit again, and what's happening to the rest of the class? They're all in the green zone, yakety, 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 right? All right, y'all talk too much. So do I. Switch and have the other person stand up.
I actually
I'll make a problem.
How did I get this?
You're so smart.
I am so sorry. All right, so you're raising your hands. You got a problem. You move in.
Alright.
You take a look.
Let's look back.
You pray. You leave. You haven't left yet. You leave. Let's try that again. Did that feel really fast? Did that feel fast?
It doesn't feel like you're actually helping the student.
Yeah.
But you've already taught the lesson.
They shouldn't need it.
Okay, so maybe I'm looking at it different because I'm a sped teacher and it requires a bit more.
Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Because listen, one of the problems that we're doing,
They're supposed to problem.
remember we talked about this before,
Even sped kids.
we're enabling, right? We're enabling, and we can't do that. What we're trying to break the habit of is every time you give direct instruction and then you do it, I do, we do, okay, you do, and they should have it, and they immediately raise their hand. Oh, poor baby, let me come over and help you. No, we have to break this habit.
Isn't that where you do though? Is where you come at the beginning, you do a teach to, and you say first 5 minutes no one raises their hand.
Maybe.
I've done that before in my
There's a lot of other stuff. Ask your partner, ask your table. Yes, all of those can be true. Yes.
I think so. I did while the one you could like to surround and just give quick little like reminders. I didn't do a good job. That's what you do.
That's a good point. She's saying it might be a reflection of my own label. I'm not a very good teacher, so I got to reteach.
I didn't teach it well enough.
So good. Get rid of that label.
Continuously guide them.
All right, try it one more time. Raise your hand. Go address the problem. Identify the problem. Pray.
Good job.
Prompt.
I'm trying to think of this problem now. Done it. Go back and check yours.
Oh, yeah. Do that again next time.
Sorry, you were trying to figure
Alright, so we're almost done. Look for signs that you're losing them. You guys, I'm sure this is always in the front of your mind.
No, I don't get hooked up.
You know, heads down, they're looking in their crotch. Steve said that, you know, they always go, how'd you know I have my phone? And he's like, well,
nobody stares at their crotch and laughs.
yeah. And if they do, something's very wrong. So, you know, a lot of kids, especially depending on your clientele, they won't always make eye contact with you. I mean, that is something you can teach to, you know, how to be, I think we commented on this last time, and a few of you commented, teaching your kids how to behave when someone's talking, whether it's a peer or a speaker or yourself. And so teaching them to make eye contact for some of these kids is really a skill they need to learn, and you need to reinforce it. So if they start putting their heads down, yawning, dozing off, whatever, I was the, apparently I have a very great gift of falling asleep with my eyes open. And I think it served me well in school, but I was a sleeper. And I slept, like all my pictures in the yearbook were of me sleeping. And yeah. And then in college I went to this very strict, if anybody's familiar with Pentecostal, I went to a Pentecostal college. And as I am the way I am now, they didn't want short hair, they didn't want profanity. I wasn't supposed to watch soap operas, and they put 14 of us in a house together, my whole basketball team. So we went to school together, went to classes together, we ate meals together, we had practice together, and we had chapel together 3 days a week. So needless to say, not healthy, right? Well, one of the things that I went to, it was in the South, and it was, they apparently had never heard of Title IX, and so our meal time was in the middle of, our practice time was in the middle of mealtime. And they didn't have any extra meals for us, like other times. So we resorted to our kitchen in our house, which was a hot plate and a microwave. Needless to say, we didn't eat very well. So in the morning when we did get to eat breakfast, I would shovel in. I'm like, whew, free biscuits and gravy, you know. So I would eat that and Sprite, and drink my Sprite. Well, I was sitting in class at this 8 o'clock in the morning business class, which I hated business, but it was required. And I was sitting in the front, like the professor was writing on the board like this. And I was over there. And that we were in twos. I fell asleep. And I jump up, and I had a dream. I had a dream that I had farted in class. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, nobody's laughing at me, I'm good, right? I'm good. Put my head back down, and then it happened. And I don't even pick my head. I'm laying like this. And my whole team is sitting by me, but then it's all seniors over here. How embarrassing. Small school, 1,400 students. I did not even pick my head up. And the professor did not turn around, right? And I'm like, did he hear me? Oh my God, how embarrassing. So I walk out of class like this. And coach comes to pick me up, and he's an older man. He comes to pick me up, and I'm sitting in the car with him and his wife and his niece who was on my team. And he says, so anybody having trouble with classes? I said, I hate my business class. I said, it is way too early. And he goes, yeah, I heard you have trouble in there. I didn't catch it. And then he goes, I heard you fall asleep in there. Didn't catch it. Meanwhile, everybody in the car is laughing except me. Turns out, my professor did hear it, went straight to my coach, and my uncle was a bigwig with the Church of God. My uncle heard about it and called me that afternoon. How embarrassing is that? Yeah, that kept me from sleeping ever again in class. But I was the queen of that. And I would tell my teachers I could still hear them. But, you know, I'm sure I didn't. Yeah, that was mortifying. Because we're in dresses too. Did I mention that? We had to wear dresses till 5 o'clock every day. Yeah, I don't know how I made it. I only made it a semester. For real. Oh, I went away for the weekend, came home one time, and there was a sticker on our TV in the common room that said, who farted? That was hysterical. Oh yeah. Mortifying. But, you know, but I used to start my school year telling my kids this so that they wouldn't have to be embarrassed about anything, because God knows if your teacher did that. But yeah, that was embarrassing and mortifying for me to be at a Christian school with only 1,400 kids, and everybody knew my last name because the family was so big in the church. And now I'm known as the girl who farted. But if you get any of those, it's time to change activities. And even if, let's say you're prepping for a test, I don't even know how that works now, but you're prepping for a test and you're losing them. So have them stand up and do, you could break it up and say, okay, if you prefer, I'm going to use the Pepsi Coke again. Pepsi, you go to that wall. If you prefer Coke, go to that wall. Okay, if you prefer baseball to football, just to get them up for a minute and then have them sit back down and move on. I don't always suggest that, especially if you have too many kids in one classroom. But even if, you know, I think in that case it might be necessary because, you know, test prep is horribly boring, right? And if it's not something they're...
You just stand up, sit down if you've got a really big crowd.
Yeah, tight.
So, yeah, stand up if you like Pepsi, sit down.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. You could do, I mean, you guys can mix it up. Don't do what is in the paper right now about the teacher that sent her, did you catch that? She's a teacher for Fresno Unified, and she sent her student to a buddy teacher. Well, the buddy teacher was a fairly new teacher, and he made her do push-ups.
Right.
And the kid is apparently, I've never seen her, but the kid is apparently on the heavier side, and so they are saying that she was embarrassed and mortified and all that. The thing that makes me sad is the teacher that sent the child is being named in the lawsuit also, even though she had nothing to do with it. She happens to be a friend of mine, and I coached her daughter. And the first I heard of it was in the news, and I'm like, oh. But I thought about it, and this guy didn't think he was doing anything wrong, the guy, but now they're both being grouped because she sent the kid away. So anyway, probably not a good idea to make them do push-ups or sit-ups or, you know, pull-ups, whatever. Plus I think it's illegal. Homework.
Not if it's voluntary.
Well.
Not if it's voluntary?
So you give them a choice? That's the thing though, would you rather have a detention or push-ups? That's a choice. But I don't think he did that the minute she went.
Was it as punishment?
I think they mean.
Yes, but he didn't even know what he was punishing her for. The teachers have never communicated.
Every time they cut,
So
you could
it
do
was
5
just a buddy
squats, 5
teacher, and she
push-ups,
sent
5 jumpy jacks,
her
5
out.
or sit on the wall.
Guy never even asked what it was. He just made her do push-ups in front of the class.
In front of the class?
In front of the class.
That's horrible.
Oh, and I let them step up.
And I'm one of those kids that was athletic, but I could not have done a push-up. Ever.
I have no upper body strength either.
No, and I'm a big girl.
Exercise is punishment.
Right.
No,
It's
it's an
not
option.
it's an
I couldn't do it, but anyway.
Or
See,
just the length
I
of
don't know if they went
the
back in
like,
court
right,
today or
write
not.
it down 15
But they're
times.
supposed to have a
I'm not
decision
gonna
by
discuss
Wednesday.
it in the class.
Your homework tonight, or before I see you in December 3rd or whatever it is, is you're going to create a questionnaire for your students and parents. They need to obviously be different. They can have similar questions, but they're going to have to be worded differently. Collect and evaluate, group them in the charts I hate, or in a pie chart, whatever, so you can see where your students fall. And then determine, the second thing is you're going to determine your students' learning styles and place them in a chart also. Sorry, questionnaire is not a chart. Second one is. First one, you're just coming up with a questionnaire. I would suggest that you have the answers just for your own, okay? And then this learning styles, you can have them do the exact same test I gave you if that's within their repertoire, or you can do your own, because I know all of you come from different, I don't want to say necessarily disciplines, but you know, PE is going to be very different than perhaps a special ed class, or not, but it may just be the wording that's different. However you want to do it, basically put your thought into that. You have a month, a little less than a month. And you're going to want to know who's what and what your classroom is composed of. You may, in a weird situation, only have two. You may just have auditory and visual. I mean, I doubt it, but that may be the case depending on what you teach. Questions about that?
With the questionnaire on top, what is the purpose of that one?
That one is, and I just put Google Forms because I don't know why I put Google Forms, but anyway, the reason for that is so that you can find out from your parents and from the kids what they think their strengths are, their interests are, what kind of support they're getting at home. Are they going to do homework, or does the whole family have to go work in the fields or work in a factory or whatever?
You probably put Google Forms because that's where you can make a questionnaire.
A questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
And then they compose it.
Yeah, you can either put like a multiple choice or
Short
little
answer.
short answers. Require them to answer each of them before they submit.
And if your parents are trained on that, like they're familiar with it, that'd be an awesome way, because then you don't have to compile the data. The learning styles you're going to have to do in class, and that's just with your kids. And how you do that, I mean, we talked about all the different ways, but you could also do vote with your feet. You know, are you really good at art? Are you really not good at art? I mean, or is art not your thing? Do you like numbers? Don't like numbers? That kind of stuff. Questions?
I was just gonna say that on the learning styles, I was probably gonna just post it on the Google Classroom for my students, and then have them do a screenshot of their results.
Oh.
And then they turn it in.
What grade do you teach?
5th grade, but I've been teaching them how to do screenshots, so they prove to me that they can do it. I can check on my end, but I want them to see. I'm like, oh, I can't see. You gotta show it, or I'm not gonna give credit. You know,
That's
even though I can see it, but in this case, I won't be able to see their results. But if they can do the screenshot,
yeah,
then they could post it. I could get a list of. I could see who's visual.
That'd be good.
You know, so.
If you have kids that are old enough to do that. The other, what was I going to say about that? This is evaluation for today, and we're done.
And it's on your agenda too.
Anybody have any questions or feedback? Anything I need to cover? And have a great Thanksgiving, because we won't see you.
Likewise.
Thanks.